On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Marty Neese. He is the Chief Executive Officer at Verdagy. We're going to be talking about scaling up businesses, especially in the industry that he's in within the green hydrogen space. There's a lot of different factors. And we're going to talk about some of the previous learnings that Marty applies to how he runs the business today. And we're going to start talking a little bit about those scale up factors that you might not be aware of. And also, when you do have a project which is within the green space, how do you keep people motivated when you just don't know the outcome? You got to keep people focused and try to innovate. And I'm sure, Marty, you're going to have a bunch of stuff for us. I'm super excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Amir. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Tell us what you guys do at Verdagy. Love for everybody to hear that.
The short version is we design and manufacture green hydrogen electrolyzers, which is the large-scale piece of equipment that is used to electrolytically split water into hydrogen and oxygen, and then you sell and monetize both hydrogen and oxygen gases,
All right. I'm
or
sure
more
that
appropriately, molecules.
molecules. I'm sure there's a nice tutorial on just how that translates into the real world, and we'll kind of maybe leave that for another day. I guess this episode, when we're talking about scaling up businesses, obviously various businesses, and I guess if you're in the green hydrogen space, there's a lot of innovation that goes on. Talk to us, I guess, from a high level. When you are running a business, you are innovating and you are developing products, and it is pretty mission driven. How do you focus on that top level messaging so that there's a clear path, yet you have to get over a lot of hurdles along the way?
Yeah, so the way to think about it is you start with the purpose in mind. And so when we formed the company, we started with a very clear purpose. And what's the purpose? The purpose for us is codified by saying delivering the power of nature. All right, so what does that umbrella statement mean? For us, it means imagine a world with an abundant amount of sunshine all day, every day, an abundant amount of wind, and an abundant amount of water. If you took those factors of nature, wind, water, solar, and you put them together thoughtfully, you'd have all the energy you could possibly want in any form you want to solve as many of the largest scale problems as you could possibly imagine for climate change or decarbonization or fuel types or economics, whatever your vector is. But starting with a really clear understanding of like, what's the purpose we're trying to achieve here? And then you take that purpose and you can break it out and break it down into constituent goals or missions or values or drivers or anything that you want to do from there. But it still comes back to the purpose that animates the work.
When you look at an industry like yours, where I'm assuming there's got to be a lot of research and design, there's got to be a lot of testing, there's got to be a lot of coming up with ideas and solutions. In that kind of industry, where you're going to fail, you're going to not succeed with every hypothesis, every test. I guess talk to us a little bit about that culture, because I think that's something where if you're in let's say, a software company, a lot of people want that blameless culture. They want people to go out and try and test things, but it always doesn't work that way. In your industry, where you are trying to invent and develop, how does that culture? How do you support that culture?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that is on our way of working. It's one of the three pillars of our way of working. And we just simply keep it as problems or treasures. And every time you encounter a problem, whether that's an experiment failure, whether that's an outcome unexpected, whatever the case may be, there's learning to be had there. So what is the treasure to be mined from every problem? And then that shifts the paradigm from one of who to blame and who's at fault to what can we learn from this particular roadblock, problem, obstacle, failure mode, whatever the case may be. And that's not a new concept. I shamelessly borrowed that from the Toyota production system, and they've been teaching that for decades and decades. And it's basically just turning failure into what's the lesson to be learned. And once you do that, people their mental polarity switches from like, oh crap, we failed, to This is awesome. What did we just learn from this failure? And then how do we go forward? The second part of that is we reinforce that with an entire system focused on rapid cycles of learning. And a cycle of learning, what is that? Obviously, there's things that you learn, and there's things that you learn by failure, if you will. So each experiment that's successful, you have to then challenge it and say, do we understand why it succeeded? And not just take the results of success as like a given that it's clear on their face that that cycle of learning was a positive outcome and we understand it completely. But you have to dig into why did it succeed? And the failures are a little easier because they'll give you a pretty strong signal of it didn't work. Then you have to go into the problems or treasures mode and mine it to get the next experiment and going. And then do as many cycles of learning as you can, as rapidly as you can. And that's how you iteratively get through experimentation and development.
Awesome. Absolutely. I guess a follow-up question to that. I mean, I love problems or treasures. That makes a lot of sense. Is there a point in which you need to understand the limit to a problem becoming a treasure? So obviously there are problems where you just potentially just can't overcome them, or they're just the ROI is not there. But I guess when you're deep in it and you are deep into the problem space and you're trying to figure it out, maybe it is hard to sometimes see the higher level lens. Are there problems that while they seem like they can be treasures, they potentially should not be pursued? Are there scenarios in which that does come true?
Generally speaking, this is where I try to bring the balance of economics into things. Sometimes if you bound a problem with the economic situation and the business case, your answer is probably within the acceptable commercial zone, if you will, while it's not perfect. So if you've been in semiconductors, you know there's no such thing as a perfect yield. At the same time, you certainly can make commercial hay with doing acceptable work and solving a ton of problems. And then you just keep pushing for less and less variability, shifting higher and higher means of performance, but keeping the economic thresholds in mind at the same time. That's where technology and economics and business have to balance each other out a little bit.
Absolutely. I think the one question I was going to ask you was, when you are in a business where, and I love the culture. It sounds like a fabulous culture to be a part of, to try to innovate. Fantastic mission. From your perspective, to keep people motivated so that they get up and still run through the wall and try to find that solution, that is something. Like it does take, a perspective to have people motivated to realize failing's a part of it, not to get frustrated. And when you are doing big things, it's going to take big efforts. How do you help ensure that the people that work for you stay motivated and are still driving forward, regardless of some of the failures that might bound to come up?
Well, I'll start with experience from a related industry. So I was in solar for a long time, and everyone's familiar probably with the term the solar coaster. That's where renewable energy fell in and out of favor. Stock markets rose and fell, and people would look outward for expressions of whether or not to be motivated. Let me look at the stock price to see if I'm motivated today. That's a fool's errand. That's like asking a manic depressive to be even tempered. So you don't do that. What you end up doing is you try to find the inherent good in what you're doing. So in the solar environment, I used to say to people, if you're having a bad day, go to the shipping dock. Everything you're doing, every ounce of the energy you're putting into your labor is showing up on the shipping dock, and everything we ship is an inherently good product that's making a difference. So start there. If you need motivation, go to the shipping dock and you'll get all the inspiration you need because you know you're building something that matters. The same can be said for an early stage company as well. You know that these are puzzle pieces that are all going into a a product that's going to deliver the change that we want to see. So when in doubt, go to the factory floor, go to the electrolyzer area, go to the pilot plant, and go watch electrolysis happen up close and personal. Watch a electrochemical cell output hydrogen, and that'll give you a top up on your tank for a little bit. Then go back to your desk and solve a computer problem and remember what you're working on. You're trying to do something that's inherently a good product at the end of the day. You're going to make a difference at some point when we start shipping these things at scale.
Very cool. I like that. That's a great story. I guess when you maybe go back to talking about the company for a second. A lot of time, and the reason I'm asking this is the company motto is very bold and ambitious, right? I mean, I think delivering the power of nature sounds like a very grand mission. From the actual down tactical execution level, when you are looking to build on that, does the company start with a super narrow view of delivering the power of nature? Are you starting with a very broad view and then filtering down? Because I think sometimes what happens with a lot of companies is they lose sight of their mission because they start seeing different pieces of how things fit together. Whereas sometimes if you're really focused on the narrow piece, you actually can start delivering. I guess in the company's case, how do you guys focus on delivering on that mission? What's the starting point?
Yeah, so let me semantically clarify something. So, delivering the power of nature is our purpose.
Yes.
Our mission is broken down into three discrete areas. And those are achieve fossil fuel parity costs, and we have time-bound goals to get there. And so let's say today we have a goal, and that's the goal we're chipping away at. What is the unit economics we have to solve for today, tomorrow, and on our way to fossil parity? We also have a CO2 reduction target, which is every kilogram of hydrogen we produce that's made in green manner is a kilogram of CO2 avoided or replaced or displaced, whichever way you want to say it. And then the last one is green hydrogen volumetric output. Let's say we produced a couple hundred tons to date. We have a goal to produce a couple thousand this year. And then there's a roadmap on our mission that shows year by year by year the reduction in CO2, the output of green hydrogen, and the unit economics. And those are the things that deliver a P&L, a balance sheet, and an income statement. Like to your point, you've got to keep it really discreet and deliver on today. That's why we put the word delivering the power of nature, not harnessing or something else. Like delivering is a very specific choice of words. It means
Mhm.
like right now, like there's no time to waste.
I like that a lot. That's also I appreciate that explanation. In this type of company, when there is a lot of R&D, you mentioned some of the economics and trying to execute within those parameters. As the CEO and looking at roadmaps, how often do you actually look at the roadmap and make those adjustments? Because obviously you're, I'm sure, getting in the data points of where projects are, where initiatives are, and you can only move as fast as you can. I mean, people have to actually create and make it economical. How often do you actually take a look at the roadmap and adjust based on progress? Because you want to deliver today, as you mentioned, but obviously you gotta build out the products.
Yeah, no less than quarterly. And that's again, I've been around doing climate tech for a while. It's a tried and true method, quarterly cost roadmap. We had to do this in a prior climate tech company where it was public. We communicated public cost roadmaps, and that's how we competed with Chinese tier one suppliers. We had to publicly communicate our cost roadmaps. So we're taking the same mantra in what we're doing now. We have a cost roadmap. It's quarterly. It's multi-tiered. So you have a level 0 at the total installed cost level. You have a level 1 at the product level. You have a level 2 at the subcomponent level. You have a level 3 of the subcomponents of the subcomponents. And then most importantly, you have to have discrete projects to move the needle on any one of those levels, and those get aggregated quarterly. So that sounds complicated, but it's really not. It's basically reverse engineering a bill of materials and then saying, what can we eliminate? What can we combine? What can we simplify? And what can we change by way of cost reduction projects? And we've been on that mission since day one.
That sounds awesome. And I guess just to kind of follow up on something we had been speaking about of, when the end goal is not clear, it sounds like the mission's very clear and the progress is being made. And, obviously there's economic factors within what you guys are doing. When you look at your role as the CEO, and in terms of there's got to be the pressure and the stress of delivering on things that have not been built, where do you turn in terms of having dialogue of within your peers? I'm sure you have other people at the C-suite level, other people within the industry. Who is, I mean, do you have a mentor? Are there people that you turn to help kind of bounce ideas off of? Because I think a lot of times founders, CEOs, we expect them to be kind of insulated and they have to have all the answers and decisions and everything. I mean, in your case, do you have that support system to help you?
Yeah, it's interesting. You always think, and I naively thought this for a long time, moving through a career, you think, oh, if I could only get to the top of the pyramid, and oh, I'll be a CEO, I'll be the top of the pyramid, genius will be afforded to me. And then you turn around and you go, you're actually at the bottom of another pyramid called a board of directors and your investors or analysts or public finance. If you're in a public company, you've got analysts that follow the company, et cetera. So I have about 20 mentors. They're called investors and customers, and they give me feedback routinely. And what the measure of maturation in a career is how well you deal with that feedback. And again, not an original thought. That's a Sheryl Sandberg thought. But the notion that somehow there's an omnipotent CEO that doesn't need coaching, guidance, mentorship, navigational help is erroneous. And as soon as you find one of those, you'll usually find the hubris is the failure mode. Right after that, you realize that it's your board and your investors who've been there, who've done that, who've seen everything you possibly are going to encounter. They've already seen it. Not necessarily every board member has the same experience base, but I'm supremely fortunate that we have investors like Vinod Khosla. We have investors like Shell. We have investors like BHP, like Yara. These are people that have been around this space for decades and decades, and climate tech investors who have seen every wind you can possibly imagine, favorable or unfavorable. And so, there's a lot to be gained by tapping into their knowledge base, but you also have to be receptive to, you don't know it all. And when you get feedback, they're giving you feedback because you don't know it all.
Absolutely. Marty, I love it. I love your viewpoints. I love the, I guess, discussion around how you manage such an ambitious project. It's fantastic. If somebody wants to learn a little bit more about the company, is there a good way of finding out some more information?
Yeah, absolutely. And we are overly communicative on our website by design. We're here for people to learn about how we're going to get to fossil parity costs, how we're going to take economic gravity and put it to good work, meaning at the appropriate time, you won't have to choose between clean and dirty molecules. You'll just be able to economically choose in your self-interest, and clean will be the one that wins. No different than grid parity before it. It happened before in renewables on grid parity. It'll happen again in molecules with fossil parity. We're on that path. Go to our website. Feel free. We share as much as we can, and it's there for as a repository of good information. And I can't thank our team enough for how well they've done in providing a good resource there.
Awesome. Marty, thank you for your time. And we'll make sure to put a link to the website into the show notes. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Amir. Great to be
A-
here.
Absolutely. That's it for the episode. Be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think Marty walked us through what seems like a very complex project, and he made it sound very clean. No pun intended. But and maybe there was a little bit of pun intended. But I really love the vision he has and how he approaches running and executing on such a grand scale, and what's being delivered, as well as how he helps people within the company focus on the bigger picture. Had some great stories. Share this with somebody else, another leader, somebody who has aspirations of being a CEO. I think a lot of great takeaways. I'd appreciate that. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how you guys like the show. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.